Before we continue, I want to warn you that this video will include spoilers right from the start. Holy cow, very little. Holy cow, that was quite an episode of Shogun. With the publication of episode 9, I think it's fair to say that this is the most crucial episode thus far, particularly in regards to the consequences it will have for Japan's future. Episode 9 was the culmination of everything that had been building up to it, from Mariko's self-sacrifice and finding meaning in her death to the revelation of Yabushige's treacherous deeds, which had been hinted at throughout the 9 episodes and had built up to this climactic penultimate episode. This was the show's culmination, so let's not waste any more time and go into the episode, dissecting it for all the important points. This episode began with a previously unexplored piece of the flashback in Mariko's life following her father's death, which is described here in the Shogun Episode 9 finale. Based on events that occurred 14 years ago, this depicted Mariko in the Shonai region as if she had fled from Toda Buntaro, the man who reportedly saved her life, but she still desired to locate it. That is precisely what she was doing when we last saw her. To paraphrase the title of Episode 8, she felt her life was falling into a black hole from which she could see no escape. For many reasons, this introductory part was crucial. The first is that it was at this time that she met Father Martin Alvito, who brought her to Catholicism. She would spend the next 14 years practicing and living by this faith, and it is also the origin of her name, Maria. Lady Mariko was inspired by a real-life woman named Aichitama, who went by Tamako and was baptized Maria when she became a Christian. I felt it was a thoughtful addition to the show because of that. The second major consideration was the strong tie it had to the conclusion. At the end, it was revealed that she had sought death on several times, as previously said. Nonetheless, her demise became significantly more significant than it had originally appeared. According to Mariko, there is meaning and significance in both life and death. Furthermore, fleeing and dying alone would have served no purpose at all in the beginning. However, towards the conclusion, she stands guard at the door, ready to die for a cause that her father fought for years ago, and she protects those in front of her. As she slipped away, she fulfilled her life's goal. Her death had significance because she had finally broken free from her unwanted life. Death of Mariko and its significance. The episode was undoubtedly stolen by Mariko's death. 3 times during the hour-long film, she was threatened with the death penalty. I wanted to leave Osaka Castle once, but someone nearly killed her as she stood there. The second time was just before she was about to commit suicide, and the third was the actual act itself, during which the doors were blasted open, meeting her with an explosive welcome. The collaboration between Ishido and Yabushige led to Mariko's demise. Knowing that the high families of Osaka would revolt if Mariko committed seppuku put Ishido in a difficult position. But if he allowed her to return to Toranaga, the other captives would be inclined to flee as well. He decided it was in his best interest to let her go by giving her the necessary paperwork. But the paper it was written on was worthless, and that was always going to be the case. He aimed to give the impression that she may depart. Then kidnap her in the middle of the night while you make out to the others that she departed. In addition, he enticed Yabushige to become involved by assuring him that he would escape death if he allowed the shinobi in. If Yabushige's participation in the plot is discovered by Toranaga, this will certainly come back to haunt him. For some reason, this episode made Yabushige look like the coward and snake he really was, and I started to despise him for it. Previously, I had thought his antics were funny and mostly harmless. He was clearly not a strong person because he was unwilling to assist Blackthorne in protecting the door and was not willing to risk his life for the people he had deceived and harmed. At first, Mariko resisted the death and fought back. It was a magnificent scenario, and I loved every second of it. I thought it was really spectacular when the shinobi stormed the room and Blackthorne pulled out his handgun, opening fire. Even though they weren't anticipating it, the strength from afar ended up being a benefit. Unfortunately, they were unable to escape to a room with stronger doors. Instead, the shinobi detonated explosives outside the door, killing Mariko as he stood in its path. I, Mariko, protest this shameful act from Lord Ishido and by my death, was Mariko's last statement. Unfortunately, she was interrupted before she could complete her sentence. However, my guess is that she was going to provide further context for her death. Yet, I think we can find a way to resolve this. I found it intriguing that in her last remarks, she used her father's name Mariko instead of Buntaro's and everyone else's Mariko Toda to refer to herself. Because her death seemed to have been caused by Ishido's acts rather than her own suicide, it was as if she were dying to protect her father and was cognizant of the gravity of the situation. This was her way of processing the reason her father had made sure she was married before he passed away, that she was carrying out the plan he had laid out for her years ago. There was a connection here to the statement that Mariko used when she asked Lady Ichiba no Kata if she wasn't sick of hearing this. As Mariko put it, flowers are only flowers when they fall, and death isn't giving up. This revealed Mariko's frame of mind in her dying moments. She found meaning in giving her life for a cause she believed in, even though she knew it would only help to shift the balance of power between Toranaga and Ishido. She was more like a fallen flower than a limb lying in the snow without any leaves. The council was gathering earlier in the episode to consider their choices, and it was implied that Mariko's murder would trigger the revolution. As a result, Lord Ishido will likely lose support and be compelled to free the hostages he had intended to hold in Osaka. Thus, it's likely that both of his worst fears will come true, and he'll be left vulnerable in the end. Toranaga will certainly get more support and ultimately prevail as a result of this. Can you tell me Toranaga's strategy? There was a good chunk of the episode where Blackthorne seemed perplexed by Mariko's actions aboard the boat with him and Yabushige. Even while she engaged Ishido's troops, we could see that he was staring at her with a puzzled expression, trying to figure out her motivations and her bigger picture. Everyone in Osaka appeared to be held captive, while Toranaga appeared to be plotting her escape from Ishido. In her return, Toranaga would have guidance on what to do. In her absence, she could commit seppuku, meaning she would be unable to fulfill her lord's wishes and could thus escape the life she rejected after her father's treachery. It was almost like getting two things done at once, because he was aware that her death would have far-reaching consequences in Osaka if it came to that. While he was being generous to Mariko and letting her escape the weight, he was also gaining an advantage that would reverberate throughout Japan. Could he have anticipated the subsequent events? In my opinion, Toranaga probably didn't anticipate that Shinobi would be summoned and be the direct cause of Mariko's demise. Nobody, not even the most skilled magician, could have foreseen that. What I'm most looking forward to in the last episode is his reaction, since he might have assumed that Ishido would have tried his hardest to keep her there. Not only has he lost Nagakato, his son, but Hiramatsu, his most faithful companion, and now Mariko as well. Someone he cared for as if she were his daughter after Eiichai Jinsai passed away. So in order to come out on top, Toranaga is essentially giving up everyone he cares about. There was one minor detail in this episode that stood out like a needle in a haystack, and I believe it was done on purpose. This proved that Delacroix had foresight into the impending conflict. Lord Ishido was the only one who didn't think Toranaga had any hidden plans. This was further reinforced when he told Mariko that it was foolish to give her exit papers when she was going back so soon. It revealed his complete ignorance of the matter and his complete lack of intelligence. The tactical maneuvers of Mariko and the final dramatic confrontation overshadowed this little 1-minute chat. However, it seemed like more than just Alfredo and the other guy were talking. It seemed like the show was trying to tell us something too. Toranaga's response will be monumental and pivotal. It is highly probable that the Battle of Sekigahara is the war that Delacroix alludes to. I would argue that Delacroix made a single mistake with this, and that is the fact that the war began the minute Toranaga entered the room with Ishido and the Council of Regents in Episode 1. That it's so much like that 80s TV show. Looking back at the 80s TV show, that last scene did unfold in a very similar fashion. After being denied the chance to return to her lord Toranaga, Mariko threatened to commit seppuku. Nevertheless, Ishido granted her permission to depart despite his knowledge of the potential harm it could create. However, it was all an elaborate hoax, and ninjas were recruited to sneak in and abduct her at night. Although it failed to match the intensity and breathtaking visuals of the episode's last 15 minutes, it successfully conveyed the mood and tone of the whole thing. You wouldn't expect it to be as visually spectacular after 40 or so years, but dang, this one was amazing. It appears that Blackthorne does sustain injuries in both the 80s series and the book, so I'm curious to see if what happened will affect his vision or hearing. The episode's focus on Mariko's thoughts and feelings. I really enjoyed seeing a new side of Mariko in this episode. I felt incredibly moved to be a witness to several of the situations. While speaking with Ishido, Mariko displayed an uncharacteristic sense of self-assurance, revealing that she neither respected nor cared about his opinion. She brought up Toranaga's grief over his son Nagakato, and Ishido's response, "He has others," seemed to be the turning moment. Doing anything that demonstrated total disregard for others. The urgency with which she had to flee, the horror on her face as she watched the men beheaded before her eyes, and the fact that she was using all her strength to resist their relentless assault, although knowing it would be a losing struggle. You could feel the anguish Mariko was experiencing on the inside thanks to her acting and the subtly orchestrated tune. You can't even begin to fathom the turmoil Mariko must have been experiencing throughout all of the chapters included here, from the self-assurance she exhibited while with Lady Ochibanokata speaking her mind without fear of repercussions to the memories of their childhood friendship and the intensity of their bond. This is my analysis of the show. This episode of Shogun was very brilliant in my opinion. In keeping with what the show has done throughout all 9 episodes, the conversation served as the show's central focus, with a rare action scene serving to further the plot rather than merely provide excitement. I would say it felt the quickest, considering this is the longest episode we've had of the show. This episode belonged to Mariko, and she truly transformed it into something extraordinary. Even though Mariko had to confront death twice before she eventually met it, the show led us to believe that she would live and escape Osaka. Even on the second attempt, she was inches from the finish line, which added weight to the conclusion. I also think Yabushige had a significant role to play in this episode. His betrayal of those closest to him and his willingness to have them killed for his own safety revealed a complete lack of honor in a society that placed such a premium on honor. He had little faith in Mariko when he told her not to translate for him anymore, barely understood Blackthorne, and was afraid Toranaga had ulterior motives. Yabushige's narrative assuredly delivered on its promise of a massive betrayal with catastrophic repercussions. The interplay between Lady Ochibanokata and Mariko was another one of my favorite parts of this episode. I had no idea if they would be friends, foes, or if there would be any bad blood between them. Yet Mariko's unwavering concern for her son's safety shone through as she saw through Ochibanokata's manipulation of Ishido. Since the show hadn't shown us much of the bond between Mariko and her kid, I thought it was a powerful moment when Ichiba threw her the responsibility of ensuring her child's safety back at her. However, he was willing to have his reputation and relationship with her tarnished if she rebelled against Ishido. Thus, it was demonstrated that Mariko and Ichiba, despite their shared upbringing and their distinctive childhood personalities, retained such traits into adulthood. In the weeks that the show has been showing, I have been critical of John Blackthorne's performance. However, guess what? At the moment, I'm particularly digging Cosmo Jarvis's portrayal of Anjin. His complicated emotions about his newfound cultural affiliation and his profound love for Eiichai Mariko are all parts of the character that I've come to believe in. It was a chilling way to end the program after Mariko died, with Father Martin Alvido's prayer voice being the very thing heard over the credits. The last seconds were incredibly passionate and fast-paced, and I was surprised by how evil the voice of prayer sounded among all of that. Even as the credits rolled, it set the mood. I can't believe there's only going to be one more episode of the program. I'm really curious to see how they'll wrap it up with what I assume will be around an hour of runtime remaining. There has to be a lengthier episode, at least in my opinion. I think it's necessary to find out how Mariko's death is going to be dealt with, how Toranaga's arrival could bring down Ishido and Osaka, and what happens to Yabushige. I really was hoping that this show will include the Battle of Sekigahara, but I really doubt it will. For a show that hasn't really been focused on fighting and has only really slid in action in the last 15 minutes of each episode, that would practically require a full episode by itself. It would contradict all the show's claims made in these 9 episodes, but I've grown to accept that. For this show to be enjoyable, an all-out war is unnecessary. It's been successful before. Shogun is undeniably a top-tier television series that is now airing and in all likelihood will go down in history as a classic. The critical acclaim it has received is well-deserved in my opinion. What a joy to read. The pace is really breathtaking. Plus, the actors give off an authentic vibe. Next week is the last episode, and I'm sad because I would love to watch it all over again. Even more disheartening is the knowledge that there will not be a second season. The good things in life, nevertheless, must inevitably come to an end. And with that, I leave you. Shaolin Episode 9, How the Ending is Made Clear. To access more movies on Shogun, simply click on the card located in the upper right corner. I will keep reporting on the show until next week when it ends because I've been doing it since the beginning. In addition, I've started exploring the actual historical people who inspired the characters. If you're interested in seeing more of that, subscribe to the channel. In your opinion, how was this episode? Post a comment telling me what you think. Thank you for watching the video. I'll see you next time.